Hi, this is Sarah from Oberstar Knits, and today we are going to pick up and work the neckband of the Nell Sweater. I have reached the point where I have separated the sleeves, my yoke is complete, I have worked a few rows of just body stitches, and you're probably like, those are a lot of tails, Sarah. Remember, this is the final wrong side of our piece. So let's turn it inside out. This is the point in the pattern where we do that. So now we can have our first look at the finished yoke on the final right side of the piece. And look at that, all those beautiful brioche increases just appearing out of the purl columns and cascading down, and our sleeves building out from the sides. It is a raglan, but it looks like it's a set-in sleeve. It's magic. So, before we dive into picking up and working the neckband, we are going to do a little cosmetic surgery on our neck cast-on edge, because as you can see, there's a rather large gap right here, and it's a little tighter on this side. So we want to make the two sides look a little bit more similar before we work our neckband. All you'll need to do this is a tapestry needle or a small crochet hook. And what we're going to do is we're going to find where this big opening is, and the stitches, the strands of yarn that go around those openings, we're basically going to follow them back into the body of the sweater and sort of just tug them across that row to tighten up this area. So I'm going to start just with this strand that I can see here. If I give it a little tug in this direction, I can see that it's connected to this strand here. So what I'm going to do is give this one a little bit more slack this way. Hold the top of it so it sort of stays in that position. Then I'm going to come grab it on the other side and pull it through. So now I've tightened up that part of the hole a little bit. There's still a hole. There are still other strands around that we can tighten, but we'll just work with this one for now. So I have this part tightened. Now I'm going to tug this and see where it comes. It comes out of this one up here. So now I'm going to pull that one a little bit tighter. And then this one comes over here. And we're just going to carry it across the row, just tightening it ever so slightly until we don't have that much left to tighten and it sort of melts into the normal tension of the stitches around it. So I'm not really giving it any firm tugs anymore. I'm just sort of pulling it until where it was before is closer to the normal tension of what's around it. Oops, that was the wrong one. Where's this one come out? Comes out over here. There we go. And then this one, yep. It's this one. So just ever so slightly. And it takes a while, but it's definitely worth putting in the time so that that edge stitch can be as clean as possible. So I'll just do a couple more stitches. I'm not pulling quite as tight anymore. I'm just sort of adjusting and letting it go across. There we go. I think that's pretty good. And then you can just sort of stretch and let them relax back into their normal feeling. All right, so it's still a hole, but it's not as large of a hole. And we are going to put a stitch into there for our neckband as well. So if it still looks loose after you've done the neckband, feel free to go back and repeat that process again to your liking. All right, so what we are going to need for our neckband is you're going to grab your smaller needle when you're gauge swatching for the 1x1 rib. For my yarn, I use a 10.5, 10.5 size, and from our yoke, we still have our full working yarn attached. So don't touch that, don't cut that, just let that be, and grab a new piece of working yarn, still keeping it in whatever combination of fibers you're using. Again, I'm using just a double strand of DK yarn held together. You can start with a slip knot. I like to just to keep it tight as I'm picking up stitches so that it doesn't slip out of that first stitch without me noticing. So I'm going to start I'm gonna turn this so that we're looking at it from the top now instead of from the front. There we go. So this is the orientation it's going to be in while you're picking up these stitches. So we're going to start at this back corner where the sleeve and the back section meet. And with your slip knot on your needle, you're going to insert your needle into the topmost stitch that you can find above this first increase of the back. This is a Berkio-Berk. You can see that there's one stitch coming out of it from the bottom and then 2 purls coming out of it from either side. So this was our first increase. We are going to insert our needle into this little stitch right above it. Hope you can see that. And if you look across the top, you'll see from that cast on edge all of these little just single stitches that come out of that cast on edge. We are going to be inserting our needle into each of these stitches. So we're not picking up stitches from in between. We want to go directly into these columns because when we perform our knit one, purl one, 1x1 ribbing, we want it to match the columns that it's coming out of. So we'll have knit stitches going down and then knit stitches coming back up out of the top. All right, so we're going to start with this. This will be a purl. This is going to be our first stitch of our round. Oh, and also, if you have a shorter cord, I would recommend either your shortest cord or a long cord so that you can do magic loop. So we're going to insert our needle directly into that stitch, pick up a loop, and pull it through. Just remember when we get back to the edge that this stitch doesn't count. This is just something to stabilize it on our needle and keep it from sliding out of this first stitch as we work along the row. So we've picked up 1 stitch. We are going to continue picking up in that same manner all the way across the back and around the corner across the top of this sleeve. So I'll pick up a few more so you can see what it looks like. So again, this stitch that's coming out of the cast on, I'm going to go right into it, grab a loop, and pull it through. Here's my next one. Some of them are tight. You may have to pull them apart a little bit with your fingers to get the point of your needle through. Here's the next one. Oops. There we go. You want to make sure you're not splitting your fibers by accident. And you want to make sure whatever stitch you're going into should not have any extra strands going over it from a brioche. This was from our setup row, so the knit stitches will have an extra strand going over the top, but the purl ones will not. They'll just be by themselves. You don't want to end up going into like one of these. Then you know that you've gone too far down into the piece. You want to be right along that edge as far up the column as you can get. So pick up a few more here. And again, I am working on a size small, so including that first stitch that we picked up, not including the slip knot, don't count that when you're totaling up these first section of stitches. I should get to 37 stitches by the time I get around this sleeve. So I will meet you over there when I'm finishing up the sleeve. Alright, so I'm just about finished with this sleeve. I have, not counting my slip knotted stitch from the beginning, I have done 33 so far and I need 37. So I will do 4 more. 1, 2, 3, and here's my last one of this kind of pickup. And it should be the top of the purl column outside of the sleeve. So our second to last stitch comes out of this knit column and our last stitch comes out of this purl column. Now we are going to be picking up in a different way. We're going to go down this purl column along our neck edge. And an easy way to find your first stitch is to first find the decrease that we made during section A. You should feel it with your fingers. It will be smaller and tighter in that column. If you remember our slip, slip, purl and our purl 2 together from section A, you can see on the other side how there's a stitch that kind of gets pulled over into that column. That is the location we are looking for. So that decreased stitch, which is right here, is going to be the third stitch that we pick up down this column. So we're looking at the stitches sort of sideways right now, looking at all these purls. So if this stitch right here with this purl bump at the top is our third stitch, then following it up the column, this would be our second stitch with this purl bump at the top, and this would be our first with this purl bump at the top. So we're not picking up right at the top like we were with all of these stitches. We're actually starting one down into that column. So I'm gonna put my needle tip directly into the middle of that purl stitch. So if you look at our purl stitches in this column, you're gonna be going down directly into the center of all of these stitches. So we picked up one, we're gonna go down the column and pick up the second one. And then the third one is going to be that decrease from before. You may need to sort of pull and tug a little bit to get that stitch to open up a little bit, but you want to make sure that you're going through both layers of that stitch because it's 2 stitches that were pulled together. So you want to make sure you're going through both of those stitches. You're not pushing one to the side or anything. So that's our third stitch we're picking up that way. We're going to pick up 15 total down this column in that same way. So I will meet you down at the bottom when I've picked up 15. All right, so I am at the bottom of that purl column. I've picked up 15 stitches since our last edge stitch up here. And I need to have an even number of stitches down this side of the neck because since we are doing a 1x1 rib for the collar, we want it to match the 1x1 brioche that it's coming out of. So if this was a knit stitch, and it will be a knit stitch in the ribbing, this will be a purl, we can keep that pattern going down to see where we're ending down here. So if this is a purl, we have knit, purl, 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 knit. So right now, we're ending with a knit. The first stitch of the front section is also going to be a knit. So we need to pick up one more stitch that will be a purl in the actual neckband. So what we're going to do, rather than going one more stitch down into that purl column, we are going to insert our needle directly into that opening that we were trying to snug up a little bit earlier. And that will be our 16th stitch of the side of the neck. Now we can start going across the front of the neck knowing that we have the correct amount of stitches on this section. So similar to how we picked up stitches here, we're going to pick up tops of columns right up next to that cast on edge. So start here with a knit, and you are going to be picking up 2 more stitches than the number of stitches that you cast on when you closed the front of the neck. So for a size small, I cast on 5, so in this front section I'll pick up 7. I've picked up 3 so far, 4, and this one gets a little bit tight just because of the twisty nature of cable cast on. That's 5. So 6 and 7 are going to look a little bit different. Number 6 twists over from the column before it because it was the last of the cable cast on stitches. And then 7, we're going to go into this stitch that's between my thumbs. It's a little stretched out in its natural form, but you want to look for one stitch above, one like single open stitch above it. You want to go into that stitch right under there for number 7. All right, so now that we've cast on our 7 front stitches, let us go up the other side of the neck. All right, so now we're ready to go up our other side of the neck. And we need to first insert into a space so that we can match what we did over on this side. So we can find the space either from the bottom or we can count down from the top. I'll show you both ways of finding the correct space. So the instructions say into the space between the knit and the purl column, so we're kind of in this world right here, and it says not directly next to the stitch you just picked up. Let me stretch this out. This is the stitch we just picked up. So it wouldn't be in this space. We have to go one stitch higher into this space. All right, so I'm just gonna leave my needle tip in there for now and we'll count down from the top and I'll show you the other way of finding it. So if we remember our decrease from section A, you find it with your fingers, that's gonna be our third stitch from the top that we pick up. So let's count down 15. So if this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. If we're counting from the top, it should be one stitch lower than that last stitch, which it is. If we went down one more, that's the space we would go next to. All right, so we're going to pick up from that space there, and then we are going to pick up 15 up the purl column. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 should be the decrease stitch. You'll know if you've gotten the right number of stitches if 13 is the little extra bulky one. And then 2 more above that, 14 and 15. So now, plus that 16th one in the space at the bottom, we have the correct amount of stitches to keep that 1 by 1 rib going when we start doing that for the neckband. Your tail from your original cast on is here. Do not get it confused with the working yarn in your hand. So just hold it away to the side so you don't even know it's there. Now we're gonna go back to picking up tops of columns to finish out this sleeve. Remember we stopped with a purl on this side of the sleeve, so we're gonna start with a purl on this side. So this is the first stitch along the top that we'll pick up, and we will just finish across the rest of these, picking up through those top loops. A few more. And you should end with this last, it's a little tight because of the stitch next to it, this last knit column top, because we started with a purl here. You can now remove your slip knot loop from that needle. We don't need to keep it anchored anymore. And you can also now place your BOR marker, and we are ready to start working our neckband. All right, for the first row of the neckband, and only for the first row, we will be working through the back loop. So we're gonna do a purl 1, knit 1, repeat around, because our first column we came out of was a purl, but just for this round only, we will go through the back loop for every stitch. This just gives it a nice structure, and it makes sure that the base of the neckband will not stretch out too much. So I purled 1 through the back loop and I knitted 1 through the back loop. It's a little fiddly and you have to make sure that you catch both strands, but it will give that first row a nice solid base. All right, I just finished my first row of purl 1 through the back loop, knit 1 through the back loop, and now I can just do 7 rows of plain purl 1, knit 1, 1 by 1 ribbing. And while you were working your first row, I hope you were checking to make sure that the correct stitches were coming out of the correct edge stitches. So you can see here, I've got my knit column coming out of a knit column, my purl column coming out of a purl column. Repeat that for 7 rows of plain 1x1 rib, and then you can finish with a sewn tubular cast off or a stretchy bind off of your choice.